Hello and welcome to this presentation on Machine Medicine's automatic falls risk estimation system. Machine Medicine is a young company based in London in an incubator called Entrepreneur First, which specialises in creating and supporting companies that can scale and have a transformative effect upon their chosen sector. My name is Jonathan O'Keefe and I'm the CEO. My background is as a doctor and a computer scientist, and my co-founder is Georgiana Petria, who is a computer scientist with about a decade's industry experience building systems for companies like Amazon. So in keeping with the ethos of attacking big problems, we are addressing the issue of falls in the elderly population. So for those of you who are not familiar with the magnitude of this problem, perhaps I can go over one or two numbers. There are about 3.6 million falls in the over 65 population in the UK every year. About 10% of ambulance call-outs are for an elderly person that has fallen. That's about 700,000 call-outs every year. Age UK estimates that with proper evidence-based processes, we could reduce the number of falls from 3.6 million to about 2.5 million. So there's about 1 million falls happening, which ought not to be. Of course, we all know how we can reduce the number of falls. We can simply train and employ hundreds of thousands of people to do fall prevention programs for elderly people. But pretty obviously, this is going to be unaffordably expensive and may even be more expensive than the problem of falling itself. So we think a big part of the answer to this question is the ability to accurately estimate risk. And risk of falling is interesting because it's not uniformly spread over the over 65 population. Indeed, it's concentrated in a subset of the over 65 population. And even within an individual, risk is not constant, but varies with factors such as medication or over-medication in particular, whether or not the person is harbouring an infection, and environmental risk factors such as whether or not there are trip hazards like rugs, or whether or not the person is in a new environment that they're perhaps unfamiliar with. Now, in terms of identifying a high-risk population, we can do no better than to go to our care homes. People in care homes are at a much higher risk of falls, and if they do have a fall, they're at a much higher risk of having a significant injury, such as a hip fracture. And if we look at hospitals and consider their burden, they get about 25% of their hip fractures from residential and nursing homes, even though people in care only constitute about 5% of the over 65 population. So it's a massively disproportionate burden of work upon them. We can get some idea as to why these people are at greater risk if we look at the intrinsic and extrinsic risk factors for falls and simply observe that people in care homes have more medication, more neuropsychiatric conditions. They are impaired in terms of their sensory function, and they tend to be older and so on. And even in terms of the extrinsic factors, which you might expect to be more controlled in an environment like a residential home, they may undergo experiences such as being moved to a new room, which essentially constitutes a novel environment and will increase their falls risk. So people have already come up with falls risk assessment tools, and some of them are pretty good in terms of their ability to assess someone's risk at the time of assessment, but they basically suffer from two problems. One is that they need to be administered by skilled staff, which is expensive and a drain on manpower. And the other is that they give you a snapshot at a particular moment in time. They don't enable you to get a dynamic picture of how risk evolves for an individual, unless of course you're doing these assessments every day, which is again unfeasible. So of the predictive factors, we can boil things down to four main categories. The first three of which are essentially historical, in that previous falls, cognitive decline, and medical history really relate to things that have happened in the past rather than what's going on now. The fourth category, gait analysis, is much more interesting because not only do the variables extracted in gait analysis, such as pace, step size variability, and coordination, not only do they relate strongly to falls risk, but they can vary with time as someone's falls risk varies. So in principle, it's quite possible to extract these variables every time a person mobilizes, and later on we'll discuss exactly how we can do that. So here I'm showing a fairly standard approach to gait analysis. We have an individual in a controlled environment on a treadmill, and we're using computer vision techniques to estimate his pose at each frame, and from that information we're able to extract useful predictive metrics such as the distance between his feet, which gives us step size and is being plotted here on the right. But obviously it's not feasible to put an individual on a treadmill every morning and get this kind of data. However, it is informative to consider what that data would look like if we were able to do that. And here is an example of some mock data. So on the y-axis we have somebody's mobility score, basically an overall measure of how mobile and steady they are. And on the x-axis we have time in days. And here what we're seeing is somebody bumbling along at a fairly good level of mobility, and then around day 23, 24, 25 there's a sharp decline in their mobility, which is associated with an increase in falls risk. And what we'd like to do obviously is intervene at day 24, 25 rather than waiting for this increased risk to result in a fall. So we have been working on systems for doing this daily assessment, and here I'm showing pose estimation being done in a similar fashion to the previous video, but in this situation it's being done in the normal environment with people behaving in a normal way as dictated by them. And what we're basically doing is gait analysis without people having to take any part of it or initiate any kind of procedure. We just do it constantly every time they walk past a camera. From that we can extract those useful predictive metrics such as walking speed, stride length and variability, and use those to constantly track someone's falls risk. We can furthermore use facial recognition and other techniques to track someone from day to day, from shot to shot, and build up a picture of how they move over time, so that if there's any deviation from normal, we've got lots of data on what their typical pattern of activity is like, against which we can compare the new deviant data and try and reach a conclusion about whether or not this behavior today is normal for that individual. We can also start to look at how somebody is managing to navigate the environment. So here we're plotting the location of an individual in an environment. On the left, an elderly patient, on the right, a healthy nurse. And if we watch the video again, you might notice that the elderly patient's course is somewhat halting and meandering, while the nurse is direct and rapid towards a target. In a sense, navigating around your environment constitutes a cognitive challenge, and so we can start to get information about people's cognitive state and changes in it, which can be fed into a predictive model for falls risk estimation. So in summary, this technology has a few key properties. One is that it's automatic, requires no supervision or intervention from humans. It's incredibly frequent in that a person gets assessed every time they walk past a camera, meaning that they're getting assessed perhaps 30 or 40 times a day. This technology is extremely cheap. It's orders of magnitude cheaper than using human assessors. And moreover, the whole system is smart in that as we acquire more and more data on more and more people, we can use this to improve our algorithms, training them to become better and better and better at identifying anomalies, deviations from the normal pattern. So we would be really interested in knowing how people would like to integrate this with their daily routine. We are very good at extracting the metrics from video and of estimating a falls risk. But how do we get this falls risk estimate into the hands of carers in their daily routine, looking after patients, getting them up, putting them to bed, washing, and so on and so forth? We've got some ideas. So, for example, one possibility is that we can have a traffic light system whereby each patient would be classified as green, amber, or red, corresponding to low, medium, or high risk. And if a patient were identified as entering a high risk zone, then we could dig deeper into the profile and see that here his mobility metrics have dropped over the past a couple of days, 23, 24, 25, and that correspondingly his total falls risk has increased. Another alternative would be that we give some analysis along with some video clips that summarize significant events that may have taken place over the previous week, such as falls, and we've built falls detection algorithms that could extract these events from the data if that were helpful. What we would like to do is to trial this technology in some real care homes, and the proposal is that we do a 6-month trial initially, with the possibility of extending it if all parties are willing. And what we require from participating care homes is simply access to their CCTV and some way of integrating the notifications of increased risk into their current workflow. And as I said previously, we're really very flexible and open to suggestion about what exactly that looks like. We'd like to build something that works for you guys. The aim we're going for here is a significant reduction in the number of falls, and we'd really love to see something like a 30 to 50% reduction in the number of falls, and obviously a similar impact on the number of associated injuries. Having said that, it's interesting to think about where this system could be applied in the future. Can we do falls mapping with it? Can we assess other interventions which are designed to prevent falls in order to say whether or not they're being effective? Can we detect when people are wandering? Can we give homes a predictive model of their occupancy in, say, 12 months? And can we provide tools that will allow people to have an estimate of the risk of something like a bed sore based on how much somebody moves? We are really interested to hear from homes that would be either interested in learning more or want to take part in a trial. If so, or if you have any questions, or if you would like to take part in a trial, please get in touch with me at jokeefe@machinemedicine.com. I will get back to you as soon as I can and would be extremely grateful for any observations that you have. Thanks a lot.